So today is January 5th, 2022, and I'm here with James A. Davis to continue the Civil Rights Oral History Project update. And James, just for the record, would you mind introducing yourself and spelling your name for us?
Okay, yes. Bill, my name is James A. Davis, D-A-V-I-S, and I'm a resident of Rayford, North Carolina, in the county of Hope, where I'm the retired sheriff.
Thank you. And we've talked before, you don't mind if I call you Jim, is that right?
That's right, thank you.
Wonderful, Jim. Well, you wrote in your email a little bit about your when you worked at CRS. If you could get this formality out of the way and just describe the timeline in which you worked at CRS and the role or roles you held while you were at CRS.
Okay, I came to CRS in 1985. I was assigned to CRS from the Assistant Attorney General for Administration, from Justice Administration Division, Justice Management Division. I was serving there as a system security specialist at Interpol, and I was working on a project, Project 80, which was actually an acquisition project for computer hardware and software for the Department of Justice. That ended in '85, and the Assistant Attorney General for JMD assigned me to CRS as a transition, and Gil Pompa was the director at the time, and he put me in an office of technical assistance and support, OTAS, as the Administration of Justice Specialist, as one of the Administration of Justice Specialists. And that was in 1985, and I retired from CRS in 1992.
Okay, now, there are a couple of terms that you used that I just want to make sure we clarify. One was Unipol.
Interpol. It's
Interpol.
the International Police Organization.
Okay, very good. And then the Assistant Attorney General that you assigned you said Assistant Attorney General for JFD. Can you tell us what
JMD, Justice Management Division.
Thank you. See, I got it wrong. So Assistant Attorney General for JMD. Thank you. All right. And in your assignment as providing technical assistance, what was your role? What was your job duty?
Okay, I was the one of the Administration of Justice Specialists, and we provided technical assistance to field staff, conciliators, and mediators that were working casework in the field, that was either that was involved law enforcement activity or criminal justice concerns, and they needed technical assistance from someone that had law enforcement backgrounds to assist them with the casework.
Very good. Thank you. So before we dig into your CRS career, could you, Jim, tell me a little bit about your career trajectory prior to coming to CRS?
Sure. Well, started my law enforcement career right out of the military. First, I was recruited into the General Services Administration as a United States Special Police Officer. I served there shortly for a short period of time. I wanted to be a street patrolman, so I took the test for the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department and was accepted, went through basic training, and signed foot patrol up in the old number 6 precinct in Washington, D.C. They don't have foot patrols anymore. But after working foot patrol for a while, I was assigned a plainclothes assignment in the 4th District, and later promoted to an investigator, criminal investigator detective. I was there for several years, but I met the United States Marshal for the District of Columbia in a court proceeding, and he invited me to um, um, apply for a Deputy United States Marshal's position. So I applied for the position and was accepted and became a Deputy United States Marshal in 1971, and worked in the DC field office, serving the District of Columbia Superior Court and the United States District Court in Washington, DC, at every level. Stayed there for about 8 years, got promoted to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center at Glencoe, Georgia, in 1978 as an instructor, as a United States Marshal Service basic training instructor. And I stayed there for a year, and I was brought back to the Justice Department, to the Justice Management Division, to be cross-trained as a system security specialist for the Justice Management Division. And then I was assigned to Interpol and to this procurement assignment that we talked about, Project 80. And I worked there from 1979 through 1985, and then I was sent to CRS.
Now, you also mentioned at the beginning of the call that you're a retired sheriff.
Yeah.
I assume that took place after CRS. So if you could briefly talk about the work you did after CRS as well.
Well, like I say, I retired from CRS in 92. I actually started a nonprofit with my church in Bladenburg, Maryland. I started a 501c3 with my church in the community of Bladenburg, Maryland, to rehabilitate the Anacostia River. Okay, so I worked, I did that for several years, and I was being vetted for the presidential appointment with the Clinton administration to become the United States Marshal for the District of Maryland. And the Senate, while the president sent my name to the Senate for confirmation, the Senate during that time, like they did with President Biden, they held those nominations for marshals and U.S. attorneys. So I got frustrated with the vetting process there and decided to return to my home state. So I came back home to North Carolina, to Rayford, and I started a nonprofit here. My pastor in Maryland took over the nonprofit that I had in Washington at the church, and I started a community development corporation here in Hope County in 95. And the citizens, of course, being born and raised here, they knew of my background in law enforcement, and they asked me to run for sheriff in the 1998 election cycle. So based on my community service and my nonprofit activity, I was elected sheriff in 1998, and I served a term. I was injured on duty in 2002, and I was retired. So I'm blessed to continue to work with the community and serve at many levels. And I'm with I serve as the chairman of the 9th Congressional District for the North Carolina Democratic Party now.
I'm sorry to hear about your injury while you were in service. And thanks for all the service you've given to CRS and the various places where you've lived, Jim. So I want to go now to your career at CRS. I'd love it if you wouldn't mind talking through one of your cases with us, perhaps one that's more interesting or more challenging, to give us a sense of what your role was, what you did in providing technical assistance, and what resulted from your involvement. Can you give us a little background about a case you might be thinking about?
Sure. As a matter of fact, again, during my time at CRS, I had the opportunity to come back to North Carolina on several cases. Okay, and one particular case was closer to my home county than the others. Okay, my home county is Hope County. I was in 19. I think it was 1998, 1988, February, no, it's February 1989. Two young Native Americans took the newspaper, the Robertsonian in Robertson County, the next county over, hostage. And as I said before, when I came to CRS, Gil Pompa wanted me to be cross-trained in hostage negotiation and barricade subject activity. So of course, when this newspaper were taken hostage down here in North Carolina, Mr. Pompa sent me down to work with the mediator, conciliator that they sent up from Region 4 in Atlanta. So the mediator, the conciliator came up to the hostage negotiation scene from Atlanta. I came down from Washington, D.C. Of course, the FBI came down to be part of the negotiation process. And of course, we worked to get the hostage situation resolved. It was resolved without anybody getting hurt. We got the hostages out and got the hostage taken into custody. And of course, this event was a day and a half long. The hostage takers gave us their demands, and of course, the demands that they gave us the indication of what resulted in them taking the newspaper hostage. Okay, they was trying to bring attention to the fact that Robertson County at that time was a triracial county, that the minority races felt disenfranchised and racially profiled by the law enforcement of the county, which was the sheriff's office. They felt that several people had been missing or killed, and the county wasn't doing anything about it, and that the Black residents and the Native American residents were locked out of the political process. Okay, so of course, can I name the conciliator that was sent up?
That's up to you. You're welcome to name the conciliator if you're comfortable with it. I can't give advice on CRS's confidentiality statute.
Okay.
We can always take it out at a later date, or if the conciliator is mentioned in a news article, that's public record.
Okay, in that the incident was a national reported incident, and all of the agencies and agents involved were named in all of the reportings. The conciliator that came up initially was Claude Hall from Atlanta. Claude and I worked on work with the FBI to help get the hostages released and the hostage takers arrested. Okay. But like I said, one of the demands was that the hostage takers wanted Governor Jim Martin, who was the governor of North Carolina at the time, to start a special investigation around the concerns that they had about the disenfranchisement of the minority races and the conduct or the illegalities that they felt was going on in the sheriff's office. So one of the things that we did as a team, Claude Hall and myself, we contacted the governor's office and encouraged the governor's office to try to help us fulfill the demands around creating an investigation around the concerns being raised by the hostage takers. Of course, that was agreed to. We got the hostage takers out. And then of course, this incident caused real concern in the community. So in order to address the issues that were being raised in the community around the public official neglecting their disenfranchisement of the minority citizens, we called a meeting of all of the elected officials at the county level in every municipality. And we met with them in a room to help us understand what their concerns were, two, how they could assist us in addressing the issues that were being raised by these young men that took the Robertsonian hostage, and how we as the community relations service could assist them as public officials resolve some of the issues that were being addressed by the hostage takers. So again, we went out into the field, met with the community leaders, not public officials, but community leaders, got good information from them. And what resulted was the county agreed to establish a tri-racial human relations commission to address the social issues that were being raised. The governor agreed to establish an investigation around the allegations that were being made by the hostage takers and the community leaders within the county. And in reporting the incident to the Justice Department, to the Attorney General's office, the United States government created enterprise zones, and Robeson County became the first of several enterprise zones that was created by the United States government to provide financial resources to minority communities and entrepreneurs from an economic standpoint. So it was a very and all of this happened over a period of time, Bill. But the outcome was so dramatic and so effective that it lasted more than 20 years. Okay, the kinds of growth and prosperity that all of that resulted in equal representation in government. You had a Native American arrested, elected as sheriff immediately. You had Black and Native Americans elected to public office, the county commissioners, and you had minorities elected in several of the municipalities. as mayors and city council folk. So the level of disenfranchisement that were being portrayed back when these two Native American boys took this newspaper hostage, it was totally turned around. And of course, the progress that were made then still exists today, almost 30 years later.
Incredible. This is the outcomes here that you're listing, of having the local Human Rights Commission, the Governor's Commission, connection to the enterprise zones, indigenous elected sheriff, diverse elected local officials. It seems there are so many outcomes that lasted and made this a more durable result of the events that you were involved with. So I do wonder, how did you interface with the FBI negotiators? Because you had the training in hostage negotiation. How did you interface with the FBI's negotiators in that process? What were you primarily working with the political parties, and they were working directly with the hostage taker, or were you working with the hostage taker directly?
Okay, now I was trained. I was an FBI hostage negotiation. I trained with the FBI. Okay, so they recognized my role as a part of their hostage negotiation team. But as I was not dialoguing with the hostage takers. One of the agents from the Bureau was dialoguing with them as we were, I guess, providing technical assistance in terms of information from the community and relaying that information. I guess I was a conduit from a communication standpoint, communicating with community leaders and the governor's office and the state representative based on what was being said to the negotiators that was inside of the we had a command post that was inside the command post communicating with the hostage takers on the inside of the newspaper. I guess we had a 3 or 4 way communication network going on at the time. But again, there were no shots. There were no shots fired. There was no one injured, and all of the hostages were released. And it was more, I believe. I never talked to Eddie Hatcher or Timothy Jacobs personally, but I believe that they were more afraid for themselves than they were being made afraid of by the hostage takers. They were young. While they did have weapons, I don't believe that they would have used those weapons because this was an act of desperation. That's what it was.
And the 2 individuals you named, those were the hostage takers, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Could you say their names one more time for the recording?
Eddie Hatcher and Timothy Jacobs. And I think Eddie has passed since that time, but I think Timothy is still incarcerated.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. I had no idea that CRS was involved in events like this, but it makes sense given the tensions connected to race and ethnicity here in this scenario. So I want to take you back to the beginning. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, of course, you had the community tension going on at that time regarding that incident. But then as we left that incident and as I came back to Washington, Now this was in February. Okay. I think in early March, one of the leading indigenous folks that were running for a judgeship against the local district attorney was shot and killed. Okay, so I had to go. The Attorney General sent me back to North Carolina to see what was going on with that, and then Bob Easley and Claude Hall, these two conciliators from Atlanta, came up to Robeson County to work with me in trying to understand what had transpired with that. So this entire Robeson County community was really reeling with concern because you had folks thinking that it may have been that this indigenous person running for judgeship may have been killed because of what had happened with the hostage taking situation and what was related to it, or he was killed because he had the audacity to run for a judgeship against the very popular district attorney that had been in office for more than 20 years and had a reputation of being, his name was Joe Freeman Britt, and he was in the Guinness Book of Record for having the most convictions of individuals on death row. Okay, putting more people on death row than anybody else in the country as a district attorney. So this Native American is running against him in the election, which was the primary was in either March or April of this year, and we had to monitor the election process because of the death of this candidate. And believe it or not, Bill, he won the election as a deceased person.
Wow. Wow. And who took his place on the ballot?
They named, the governor appointed a Native American to serve in that post.
Okay. That's incredible. So I want to stick with this sequence of events. You played a role in the negotiation and addressing community tension, getting the neighborhood leaders and the political folks on board to move forward. You played a role in going back down after the shooting of the indigenous candidate, and you played a role in monitoring the elections moving forward. So when you were called to go back after the indigenous candidate was killed, tell me, did you do anything to prepare to go to that case? Or because you had already been in North Carolina, the preparation was simple? I know what's going on here. I've been monitoring.
Well,
so,
no, not only that, but the time frame was so short. I mean, it was almost like a turnaround.
Okay.
Was able to get home for 2 or 3 days or maybe a week. I can't remember right now what the spacing was, but it was a very short turnaround. You know, I had filed my report on the hostage taking. Of course, the government had taken action around the enterprise zone designation, and all of a sudden, here this major incident again in Robeson County. So, in that I had been down there, I was I was familiar with all of the players from an official standpoint. So it made my job that much easier going back, trying to get a better feel for what was going on around now this murder.
So in a typical case, what would you do to prepare once you were asked to provide technical assistance, say in Miami or Atlanta or Seattle? what would you do to prepare to go out and provide technical assistance in a case?
Well, of course, if it was a regular casework assignment, I would find out from the conciliator or mediator involved what their specific needs would be. Whether it was a training mission where they would need some technical assistance in developing models for the training, uh, if it was a resource that they needed in terms of identifying a specialist that was in the law enforcement arena to address specific issues. If from a documentation standpoint, if they needed documents developed or assembled from a law enforcement standpoint or administration of justice standpoint, then I would do that. I would assemble the documentation, ship them to them. If they needed on-site presence, then I would respond and provide whatever technical assistance they needed.
And so when you were getting, if you went on site like you did in North Carolina, how would you assess the situation? Would you, you said the first time you were in North Carolina, you worked with the community leaders to kind of understand what the tension looked like. Is that a typical assessment for you when
Yes.
you arrived on site and working
Yes.
with the conciliator? Were there other things that you did?
Well, the main thing, again, understanding what the conciliator or the mediator needed from me as a technical support provider. And then I would assist them in making the necessary contacts with citizenry and officialdom to get a holistic picture of what the environment was like and what kind of results was expected from the activity that the CRS would bring.
And so because you were providing technical assistance and you had this depth of background in law enforcement, my assumption is that you were brought into situations so that you could connect with law enforcement specifically.
Yes.
Were there ever law enforcement officials or others who didn't refuse to talk to you? And if there were, what would they do? What would you do?
Oh no, that well, you know, again, we never had a law enforcement agency refuse to dialogue with us, and if we did, we would assess why we felt that we had some resistance, and of course use the tools that were given us. You know, again, everybody has leadership. Okay, so if it was a police department that was resistant to supporting what we were trying to do, then we would talk with the mayor and the city council to the mayor, the manager, or whoever their supervisor was. If it was the sheriff, of course, you know, in most jurisdictions, the sheriff is the highest elected official in the county. Of course, you would again use some persuasive resources from that whatever political party that sheriff is elected from. You know, there's ways to help folks realize that cooperation is needed to address the issues that's causing the tension in the community in which they are supposed to be a leader or an official.
Can you provide any concrete examples of those persuasive political forces that you would use that were connected to the political leadership?
Okay, well, you know, I'm in politics myself. You know, being an elected official. You know, Tip O'Neill coined the phrase back in the day that all politics are local. Okay, politicians, a good politician, listen to the community, the grassroots. All communities have community leaders, whether they wear a tie or they got grease up under the fingernails. Okay, community leaders, grassroots leaders. One of the tools that I use, and I still use, and I used then, was getting to know who the big stick carriers in the community was. Okay, when I say big stick carriers, I mean that those persons who have the influence on the grassroots citizens and the influence on whoever sitting in that office. So those are the people that we try to develop relationships with, because those relationships are invaluable. Okay, it ain't about money. It ain't about ego. It's about respect. Okay, and those community leaders every day walking around folks that are able to get citizens to go to the polls and elect the individuals that they want to serve them. Okay, and politicians respect that if they want to get elected and stay elected.
Thank you for that. I like this phrase, the big stick carrier. Good. So once you arrive on the ground, and you've talked to the big stick carriers and the other individuals who are connected politically, and those community leaders that you talked to, how did you decide on what your plan would be? I know you did this in consultation with the conciliator that was already on the ground, but were there particular guideposts, or did you have a gut feeling, or how did you make a choice about how to move forward with your work?
Well, in interviewing the leaders in the community, they pretty much tell you what it is that they want to see. Okay, and again, experience and collaboration is what you use to decide how to go about getting the results that you want. Okay, and the results that we wanted was developing a mechanism where we would have a win-win situation. Of course, in order to affect that, we have to have decision makers in the room at a level where decisions could be made without resistance, where accountability could be addressed, and everybody understood who was responsible for what and how the process would be implemented. So, in order to get to that place, we had to have the decision makers come together as a whole and sit in a room looking at each other, so that no one would be finger pointing or backing away from a process or decision. You see, again, anytime we go into situations, we always look for compromise. We look for a way to get the job done without adversity, without a lot of confusion, but with compromise. No one is going to get everything that they want, but once we're able to see unity or respect, or those elements that would allow a community to come together, that's what we in CRS back in the day, those are the kind of things we look to try to achieve.
Good. So in these conversations, you said at the beginning of your last answer, you said that the participants typically told you what they wanted.
Yes.
So were you ever asked to do something that you were unable to do, either by someone directly involved in the dispute or by an outside party. And how did you deal with that?
Well, I don't, again, if there's, from the mission and the mandate of the agency, what you can and cannot do. Okay. So, you can't make any promises that you can't keep. You don't lead people on, you don't give false hope. Okay. So again, based on training and experience, you go in and give an honest and forthright assessment of the situation to who you're talking to, whether it's a community resident or a community leader or an official. Straight talk. you know you don't go in and be hyperbolic, or you don't talk about things that are not relevant to what you're trying to achieve, and you be frank, forthright, honest, and understanding of what their situation is, and you let them help you help them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Again, because they're going to be the ones to live with whatever process we put in place, whatever mechanism that's derived from the support that we give them. They're going to be the ones to implement and live with the decisions that's made. And we try to, again, back in the day, we tried to make sure that we left a case complete, where everybody understood what was derived from our presence, whether it was a mediation document that was signed by all parties, a recognition of what had happened because of the collaboration that was established by the parties.
So let's now shift a little bit and go to the process itself. So the mediation or conciliation process that you were involved with, typically providing technical assistance in conjunction with a local conciliation specialist. My background is in mediation. That's what I teach and train here at Ohio State. And so the questions moving forward are broken into two categories: table-oriented processes, meaning sitting down at the table and hashing it out, and street-oriented processes. So maybe during a protest, if you were shuttling back and forth between protesters and police. So I want to focus first on a table-oriented process. So in your experience providing technical assistance, who would typically be at the table in a conversation that you engaged in where you're providing technical assistance?
Well, in most situations where we had casework that involved developing a plan of action from a tabletop standpoint, you would have the affected parties. Okay, a leadership from the affected parties, of course, the conciliator, so that we would get a good understanding from the affected parties what the issues were, and what kinds of obstacles we would be faced with, if any. Having the affected parties either from the community or from the organizations that were being complained about or addressed at the table, we would be able to get a good feel for what it is that we needed to do as CRS representatives, you know, and if there were, of course, law enforcement issues or criminal justice issues, whether it was in relationship to the actions that were being taken or actions that were being addressed by CRS with the community, then I would get a good understanding, a good idea of what I needed to do to coordinate with local law enforcement or the criminal justice system to bring in the technical assistance or the specialists or get the resources from a law enforcement standpoint to help resolve the issues that were being talked about at the table.
So when we talk about who's around the tables, did you ever have any challenges getting particular parties to the table?
Sure. All
What
the
were
time.
some of those challenges, and how did you break through?
Well, again, you know, once you identify folks that should be at the table, you know, you have to, unless they are directly involved, you might meet some resistance. So in that case, you have to really appeal to their sense of desire to see their community or the situation be exacerbated or resolved. You know, and again, public people want to be public people want to be perceived in doing the right thing. Okay, and believe it or not, now the mere fact that we are from the United States Department of Justice, that carries a big, that's a big deal. That's a big deal to local law enforcement. That's a big deal to local public officials. And while we do what we do as Justice Department employees, we have a role to play in making sure that that community leaders and officials understand that we are there to help. You know, and that resistance are broken down by us just being who we are as Justice Department employees, and being able to help them in resolving the concerns that they might have. So while they might initially resist, ultimately they come around and provide the support and become part of the coalition or become part of the resolution of what it is we're trying to achieve.
I want to talk about goals for your participation in the process for a little bit. What were your goals in a process? And maybe they were different based on each scenario. Did you articulate those goals? And what were the goals of the participants?
Yeah, well, again, like I said earlier, having folks at the table, having a good, developing a good relationship with the various players or parties involved, Bill, uh, we would, from the beginning, let the participants know what we were able to do as Justice Department representatives, and try to determine what the outcome that they wanted to see would be. The goals would be, our goal would be to help them resolve the issues to the satisfaction that would be amenable for the community. That would be our goal. Their goal would be to help resolve the issues within their community for the best outcome, whether it was a march or whether it was a um, 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 uh, community concern around race or whatever. Uh, our goal would be helping them meet their goal.
Did you, in a table-oriented process, did you typically identify ground rules for the conversation? And what were they? Or did you not use ground rules at all?
Well, and 9 times out of 10, the mediator or conciliator at the event or at the table would be the one that would develop the guide, the ground rules. As a technical assistance provider, I'm there to support them. I'm there to provide the resources that they determined would help them be effective in providing the resource, the results that they were there to provide.
So,
I'm a specialist in law enforcement and administration of justice.
So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So when you, let's say the conciliator identifies 3 overarching issues that the parties want, or they want to discuss with the parties. And the parties are amenable to those 3 issues. And one of them is law enforcement practices with respect to Black and Indigenous communities. Mm-hmm. Would you facilitate that conversation? Would you lead that conversation? Or would you, in your role as a technical assistance provider, provide ideas about how other communities have resolved or addressed similar issues? Can you say a little bit more about what you would do when you were in the weeds of a conversation about police engagement with Black or Indigenous communities?
Sure. Again, as a minority practitioner myself, I would always be available to provide, personal experiences. And as a technical assistant provider, I would be able to address the issues around policy and practice and activity, and give guidance and direction, or give voice to what was needed or what was desired from that area of specialty. I wouldn't necessarily lead the conversation, but if the conciliator is always the conciliator's case or the mediator's case, and I would take my lead from them to voice, to give advice or counsel or be a part of the conversation that they wanted me to assist them with. We are there to provide support to the field.
So, yeah, I appreciate this, and I'll just let you know, and for the eventual reader of this transcript, but some of the questions here, because your focus is providing technical assistance, I'm going to skip over because you're not facilitating the conversation in a way that a conciliator might, and that's perfectly okay. But some of them are critically important, like this one. How, Jim, did you build trust with the parties when you were brought in to support a conciliator's work?
One, I would explain to them who I was, give them a little of my background, and give them a good, honest assessment of what I saw of their concern or issue, and what I could do from where I came from to assist them. I think trust is very, very important in the work that we do, and building that trust initially is a very responsible position of the conciliator and technical assistant provider as we go into the field. So yeah, honesty, forthrightness, all of those things go hand in hand with a successful mediation.
How did you deal in a table-oriented process with seemingly intractable demands? Perhaps one party was proposing something that law enforcement officers cannot do. How would you approach that issue?
Well, keep them talking. Keep them talking, because again, once they understand based on repetition of fact and truth, it get to a point where folks then realize that unreasonable requests, and especially when there are rules or policies or law that prevents the provision of certain expectations, they'll concede. I've been in those situations, but like I say, you just have to keep talking.
How did you just mentioned issues related to fact? How would you help deal with a vehement disagreement over facts? To give you an example, I could imagine a police-involved shooting. You're called in the aftermath of a police-involved shooting, and there's disagreement about what took place immediately before the shooting took place, and that could have an impact on the outcome of or what's taking place in the community. How did you deal with a disagreement over facts?
Well, and that Bill, again, that's a very good question, and the reality exists even today. Back in the day, we did not have smartphones and video situations and photographs of instant events. So you had to depend on source information. Okay, eyewitness, folks that were party to, knowledgeable of, and of course, facts. You try to make sure that the disputants know what the reality is, and that's whether you have to assemble documentation, policies that existed before the fact, and policies that are amenable to the incident or to the facts. So disputants understand if they have the information that is realistic. Okay, you can't give someone something that, and you don't want to promise someone something that don't exist. Okay, so it's important that you know what the facts are yourself. If there's policy and procedure connected to situations that you're addressing. I'll give you an example. In law enforcement, of course, like you said, that shooting situation, police department's supposed to have use of force policies. Okay, continuum of force policies, and it's incumbent upon you as a technical assistant provider to make sure that you have those policies where you can demonstrate, have them given to folks that have concern that these things were in place and should have been adhered to by the officers involved. so that they will have confidence that you, being the technical assistance provider, is holding the law enforcement leaders accountable for the conduct of the officers that have now taken an action that's in dispute. So if the policies are in place and the actions that were taken were consistent with the policies that were in place, irrespective of the different races or ethnic identifications of the individual, there's still issues to be resolved. And hopefully by having these conversations and having this dialogue, we'll come to some agreement. You know, it's hard to convince something, especially when you have a situation where you've had loss of life. Okay, it's hard to convince the parties, especially the parties that's been adversely affected, to understand the dynamics of policy, procedure, because they are always going to be in the back of the mind. If it hadn't been of another race, it wouldn't have happened. You know, so that's what you got to overcome as a minority service provider. You know, you got to be able to give that level of assurance that, hey, I'm doing all that I can as a technical assistance provider to get to the truth and the factual evidence of what happened, so that you can know that you have forthrightness in what we're trying to do, just to assist you.
That's a really helpful example of how you walk through issues with respect to facts and come back again to the one of your core values of being forthright with the parties. So on a similar note, but different concept, how would you deal with a fundamental disagreement about values? You know, you might be with parties, I imagine indigenous and police parties at a table-oriented process that have different values that are core to them. Or in a modern sense, you might think of and the aftermath of a police-involved shooting, negotiating or mediating or providing technical assistance, where you have advocates from an abolitionist perspective sitting down in the same room as police. How would you grapple with a fundamental difference in values?
Well, you know, again, values is self-imposing. Okay, you know, we know what common values are. We know what values are in terms of societal values. Okay, but when you come down to personal biases and personal agendas, that's what we would have to try to get those personal biases of those personal values. We have to try to get those addressed now. And I would ask the question, you know, and ask the question from a very, you know, honest perspective. You know, is this your personal value, or is this your culture value? If it's a personal value and not your culture value, then is there a way to set it aside and listen to the overarching issue that we are trying to resolve, you know. And again, as I said earlier, Bill, you know, if you keep parties talking, talking about how they feel and how they want to see things accomplished, that conversation, and you know, we are at a point in our history right now today where members of the United States Congress have stopped talking. You know, the art of compromise have been diminished to a point where we don't know what's going on in this country. Okay, and I believe that if we keep people talking at every level of society about disputes is going to be resolved by people coming to uh, uh, a recognition that they need to come together and address what's being put on their plate, or address what is before them. But you got to do it collaboratively, you know, and that's what's not being done today. But that's, you know, that's a technique that we used years ago. I don't know what's being done today in the community relations service, but I tell you, and I'm glad to be part of this oral history, because the techniques that we used back in the 80s, I wasn't there in the 70s or the 60s when CRS was created, but I tell you, I was there with Wally Warfield and Ozell Sutton and uh, uh, um, uh, Mr. Levine there in his CHEP's office. I mean, uh, we had some leaders in dispute resolution, brother, back in the day, that really addressed the concerns of this country when it comes down to race and ethnical kinds of disputes.
Can you talk about any other specific techniques you used? You've mentioned techniques generally. So were there other specific techniques that you recall using that were really effective when you had table-oriented conversations?
Well, you know, body language is understanding body language is a technique that I would encourage current day conciliators to become knowledgeable of, you know, um, um, because you want to be able to look a person in the eye and understand where they're coming from. You want to be able to hear what's being said. I know words are very important, but hearing what a person is saying in the inflection of their voice, or the way that they are trying to describe something from a cultural standpoint. Give you an example. Black folks talk differently than white folks. Okay, and as you go into a casework situation, you need to understand that from a technical standpoint, and use techniques that address those cultural issues. Indigenous people uh, have different cultural kinds of not needs, but behaviors that from a technique standpoint, you have to be knowledgeable of. And I would say from a conciliations point of view, when you have do your homework first on a case. Get to know who you are going to be working with, and their cultural and racial and ethnic kinds of backgrounds, so that you can deploy the techniques and other kinds of support systems that you would need to help resolve the concerns that you want to address. I'm down here in North Carolina, where we have 4 basic races, blacks, whites, Native Americans, and Hispanics. Okay. Right now, in Southeast North Carolina, we have a good, I don't think that we have racial issues among the minority races as we have had in the past. Issues that are coming up now are pretty much based on the extremist elements that exist throughout the country. And I think from a community relations standpoint, Bill, that's going to be with us for a while. The community relations service, we can make a difference in this country if I think the government would utilize the talents that we have. And Bill, let me say this. I belong to a group now called CRS Remembered. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but CRS Remembered is a coalition of old us old timers. Some of us are in our 80s, and I just turned 75 a couple of months ago. So we were back there in the day, and we learned from those that started CRS, and it came up through CRS as it got matured, and now we're trying to pass it off to a generation of conciliator and mediator that's going to take it into the future. And this oral history project, I hope, will help new young people develop the tools that they need to provide the services that this country needs.
I hope so. That's part of the aim, is to develop a record of some of the incredible work that you all have done in carrying on the legacy of the founders of CRS. So if you don't mind, I want to turn back to a few specific questions about your processes. When in that example about that you just shared is exactly what I was looking for, about body language, about knowing who you're meeting with and working with, and what their ethnicity and connections are in advance, so you can prepare effectively. I wonder, how did you work with power disparities? I've read in other oral histories, prior oral histories, where conciliators are meeting with a warden and prisoners, and the prisoners have no
power,
de minimis power and de minimis negotiation ability. And so conciliators have spent time training the prisoners to negotiate and advocate for themselves, and then they conciliate. Have you engaged in processes like that, or did you have other techniques to work through power disparities?
No. Casework wise, I've never had that experience in casework, but of course, being in the profession that I'm in, I had experience in that And of course, you know, um, um, while you remember me talking to you about everyone has a leader, everyone has
Mhm.
somebody that to report to. Even in the situation that you described around prisoners and not being able to have a voice with the warden if they were being if you had an issue uh, in that power difference.
I do recall, yes.
I've had I've had situations where I've had to remind people of where they are and the fact that even though they are supposed to be this powerful individual or person, they are still supposed to be a servant or a leader, and they even though these individuals below them may not be of a sort that they respect, but they need to respect them. You know, humanity is humanity is humanity, and I have to help. You know, one of the things that I do, even in my work today, is help people and reminding them that we are all God's children. You know, we are all God's children, and what we need to do is to know that as we walk through these days of life, we are here to effectuate God's will. Okay, and that's by helping and loving humanity, helping and loving humanity. You know, and when it comes down to public service, sometimes we have to remind our public servants at whatever level they are in that they are still responsible for loving and helping humanity. Does that make any sense, Bill?
Absolutely. It does. And at our, I can imagine a scenario where you're reminding or trying to help individuals remember why they are public servants in the first place.
In the first place, yeah. And especially, Bill, especially elected officials,
Mhm.
okay? Because elected officials can get on their high horse, you know, oftentimes, and that's what causes them not to be able to hear grassroots, you know, and from from a community relations standpoint, we have to have the courage to be forthright. We have to be armed with the information to be able to articulate truth, speak truth to power. You know, I mean, you know, sometimes you go into a situation and folks will identify and recognize who you are by the credentials that you carry, okay, in your wallet. And they respect those credentials. But they might be of a station or a status of life where they feel that they are, while you are carrying these credentials, that their position might be a little bit higher than yours. So you have to be bold enough or uh, aware of what your role or responsibility is to help them understand or realize who they are and what they're supposed to be about. You know, and as conciliators and mediators and technical assistance providers, as we do our work, we oftentimes have to remind governors and mayors and superintendents that they are still elected officials, and servants of the people. Bill, that we the people thing is real.
That's true. It's the first phrase in the Constitution. That's for sure. So when you were in a mediation session, there's often a lot of tension. There might be tension between parties involved. What were some of the techniques that you used to diminish tension when hostilities were increasing during conversation?
I used to carry around a pocket full of mints. Okay. I mean, candy.
Yeah.
And if I encountered a level of hostility rising up, I would offer a mint. Hey, let's take a break and have a mint. And again, just the offering of a token, being kind, offering a little humanity, that brings a person right around. Believe me. Does that make any sense?
Offering a little humanity. It does. When I was a labor attorney, folks would recall stories about how the attorneys would be arguing at the negotiation table for hours. And they'd have a smoke break and they'd all be standing outside together, shooting the breeze, right?
Mm,
They'd be
right.
back in the room, back at it again. But that was a different part of it. And so offering that piece of humanity reduced tension for you. That's a great illustration. Did you ever deal with anyone who threatened, aside from the hostage scenario, did you ever deal with anyone who ever threatened violence in a mediation session?
No, it would not in a session. But
what about folks who left, threatened to leave? Did you ever deal with any folks who threatened to leave, and what did you do with those? If you can recall,
to leave the discussion, or to leave the situation that we were trying to resolve. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, but then you have to be insistent enough to keep them involved. You have to appeal to every sense that they have. If you have to plead with them, you do that. If you have to try to appeal to their sense of responsibility, you do that. It's your role as a dispute resolver to help persons that you're resolving disputes between to see the benefit of a resolution, of an amicable resolution, you see. So, that keep them talking, that's real. Because if you're able to keep people talking, and you're able to help them see the humanity in the decisions that they make, because it's going to be their decision. It's not going to be yours. It's going to be theirs. And you want them to compromise. You want them to feel like they have won, or at least been a part of a winning situation. And you have to appeal to their sensibilities. You have to appeal to their sense of justice, sense of reality. And oftentimes, you have to have a cold-hearted individual after you go through all of the techniques and all of the conversations that you've had. you got to be pretty good to get away from Jim Davis if you walk away from a session or dispute situation. Because I'm a dog. I'm gonna keep you talking. I'm gonna, if I have to apologize to you, if I have to promise you the moon that I will, I'm gonna do what I need to do realistically to get you where you need to be to agree to what we need to agree upon.
Let's talk about agreements for a little bit. When you were brought in to provide technical assistance, were the agreements that you were involved with, were you suggesting the solutions as the expert on the subjects? Were the parties coming up with the solutions themselves? How were those solutions developed?
Okay, I would provide the resources that would be part of the agreement process. Okay, if say if we had a situation where we needed a model um, um, formats, say a civil liability policy, a civil liability agreement, or use of force policy that would need to be vetted up to deciding if they needed to put together a um, um, citizens review board, something like that. Those are the kind of formal agreements that disputants would normally look to, my kind of specialty to bring and provide. So those are the kind of things that I would offer for them and be the lead in helping them understand the dynamics around it.
Okay. So you would provide resources that they wanted to incorporate into their agreement. You earlier described in the hostage negotiation scenario in North Carolina, an agreement that was really durable. You saw it last for 20 years. From your perspective, what did you do to assure what other solutions were durable? What did you do to assure they were carried out? Did you play any formal role in any or many of those resolutions and overseeing that they were carried out?
In some of them, but in many of the cases, I just stayed in contact with the individuals that were affected. In that personal contact and just letting folks know that you care about the results that happen. That's a lot. That means a lot to them, and it just keeps your records updated too as to how things are and what you've done.
So, what were some of the formalized roles that you played? You said you played a bit of a formal role in some of those. What were some of those formal roles?
Providing technical assistance to the students. I'm gonna give you an example. Can I tell you another story?
Mhm.
Okay, and this is early on. This is early on in my service with CRS. Okay, I told you that the assistant attorney general sent me over to see my boss, who was Larry Wallace, and Gil Pompa were friends. Okay, Gil Pompa, as the director of CRS, even though he was titled director, he was on the level of assistant attorney general. Okay, so Larry and Gil were close friends. So Larry and I were friends. So when Gil asked for help forming this hostage negotiation barricade subject program in his Office of Technical Assistance, Larry sent me over there because of my background in law enforcement. Okay. The first case that I went out on, Bill, was of a subject in North Carolina who had shot and killed the mayor of Madison, North Carolina, wounded an SBI agent, and had barricaded himself in a warehouse. Okay. Ozell Sutton was the regional director in Atlanta, and he was sent to give Mr. Pomple asked him to meet me in Greensboro. I came down from Washington, and we drove to Madison, North Carolina, which was north of Greensboro. When we got there, the warehouse where this barricade subject had barricaded himself was on fire. Okay, and the this was an overnight situation where they didn't put the fire out because it was a real blaze. And the next morning, of course, we found the barricaded subject in the warehouse dead. Okay, from the being burned. Well, Jerry Welch, the police chief of the town of Madison, you know, we worked with him because, again, all of this commotion, all of this, the situation with the perpetrator, who was a long-standing, upstanding citizen of the town, and supposed to be a friend of the mayor's. The community was in a confusion about why this all happened. The mayor was a white man, the perpetrator was a black man, but they were supposed to be friends. The police chief had never experienced anything like this in his career. A shooting like this and a barricading subject incident. So one of the things that we did from a CRS perspective, after we got the community tension diminished, we invited the chief of police to come to Washington, and working with a couple of the agencies in the Department of Justice, we put on a training session around barricade subject, hostage taking incident for this police chief, and got him some training with one of the local police departments in Prince George's County, Maryland, that assisted him in understanding how he could be more effective in his little town in North Carolina. Now, that was technical assistance that was provided on the ground in North Carolina, with a local police chief, connecting him with a larger police department on a subject matter issue that would help him and benefit his town from years to come. The relationship that he established with the police chief in Prince George's County lasted for years. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I mean, that was CRS. That was the kind of work that CRS did from a technical assistance standpoint back in the day. Those are the kind of things that you utilize as a technical assistance provider in headquarters for the field. Yeah, even though Ozell Sutton was the regional director and one of the premier field operative that we had in CRS at the time, you know, he was appreciative of the technical assistance that I provided as a administration of justice specialist at headquarters, you know, that he didn't have access to, you know. So those are the kind of roles that we play in supporting one another.
And I see your role as connecting others who are similarly situated with different styles of experience, meaning this hostage barricade experience. I imagine you did that in other scenarios as well, to support others who needed that technical assistance.
Yeah.
Whether it's you providing the training yourself or connecting them with others who had been through a similar situation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That is a great role from my perspective. So a couple more quick questions about table-oriented processes, and then we'll probably pause this interview and reconvene if you're up for it at another time. So did you always work with groups together in the same room, or did you have shuttle or caucus mediation sessions where you moved between groups and kept the parties separate?
No, I would normally work with the conciliator or the mediator in the environment that they would establish for their casework. Because remember, as I said before, they were the leaders. I mean, it was their casework. I was a technical assistant provider, so I followed their lead and supported them in whatever it is that they wanted to get done.
And so how long you participated in dozens of these table-oriented processes?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And so how long would they last? Half a day, 6 months, years sometimes?
Well,
give me a range. So
yeah, well, some lasted, like I say, some lasted several hours of a day. It depended on the kind of environment that the mediator or the conciliator found themselves in. But whatever the time frame was, we were there to support and provide them with the resources that they needed to effectuate a good outcome.
yeah. So one last question about outcomes. From your observation, were the outcomes that you supported, were they durable? Did they last? Sorry, I broke up there a little bit.
You froze a little bit.
Yeah, I apologize. Were the outcomes that you supported, the agreements that you helped the parties reach, did they last or did they fall apart? From your observation, what typically happened?
Well, fortunately for me, many of the cases that I worked on from the times that I was there, and like I said, I was only there from 85 to 92, 7 years. Much of the work that I was associated with have been lasting, from that time to now. I attribute that to the work of the agency, the resources that we provided, and the staff that were in place. Okay. I was blessed and fortunate enough to work with some of the best. And for yourself, Bill, in dispute resolution, you got to have a lot of patience. You got to have a lot of persistence. And, you have to add a little bit of love into it too now. Because you got to care about the environment that you're in and the people that's connected with it. And I guess that's who we are as dispute resolvers. Because even though some folks might have law degrees and some folks might have badges and some folks might have collars, and we all have to have concern for our fellow man, and trying to help themselves in the situations that they find themselves in. And that's not easy today, because Bill, back in the day, we didn't have internet, we didn't have email, we didn't have social media, Facebook. We didn't have all of those things that conciliate. I mean, I believe today the average conciliator or mediator would be able to do a lot more with resources from a technological perspective that they have today. But I don't think they would have nearly the fun nor developing the camaraderie, the camaraderie that we developed back in the day, because we had to talk to people. We had to get in the room, and we don't have necessarily the smoke filled rooms now that we had back in the day. But yeah,